Tonight, COVID cases surge as penalties for rejecting the president's vaccine mandates originally set to go into effect today. Plus, Russia amassing forces on the border with Ukraine as the United States downplays ongoing talks with Russia.
I don't think we're going to see any breakthroughs.
And if the Supreme Court overturns the Roe v. Wade decision legalizing abortion, California aims to become an abortion sanctuary.
Gavin Newsom is actually talking about paying women with unplanned pregnancies to fly to the state of California.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The pandemic taxing the system and Americans' endurance. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup. Crowded hospitals filling to capacity, straining overstretched medical staff from coast to coast. The U.S. reporting an average of about 700,000 COVID cases a day. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court's pending decision regarding the president's vaccine mandate for large private businesses has employers and workers waiting to see whether they'll stand or go. CBN senior Washington correspondent Tara Mergener joins us now with our top story. Tara.
Well, John, since the Supreme Court has not acted, employers with more than 100 employees will either have to enforce the vaccine mandate or get ready for weekly testing per the Biden administration. This as the Omicron variant wreaks havoc across the country.
While businesses across the country wait for word from the Supreme Court following Friday's arguments, experts believe the latest wave of COVID cases will peak soon.
Right now, we are closer to crisis situation than we ever have been.
Health officials say the Omicron variant is responsible for 668,000 infections daily, with more than 138,000 Americans in the hospital fighting the virus.
In my career, I've not seen numbers and volumes like this.
None of the people we've taken care of who got really sick from COVID thought they were going to get really sick from COVID.
More schools are also going back to remote learning. Citing safety concerns, teachers in Chicago are refusing to return to the classroom.
Hopefully produce confidence that we're not talking about a long, indefinite period where schools are remote.
90 schools in Philadelphia will be closed this week, as will school districts in Detroit, Michigan, Newark, New Jersey, and Cleveland, Ohio, among many others.
I think my kids' education is being hurt by it. I don't think kids should be on the computer for 8 hours a day.
Those districts electing to go back to remote learning due to the surge in the virus and teacher shortages. Yet many health experts say in-person learning is safe.
If people wear high-quality masks, even without those other upgrades, which I would like to see, it still is safe for kids and teachers to be back in school.
And as if the worker shortage isn't bad enough, an estimated 5 million are expected to stay home. In some places, the worker shortage leaving grocery stores empty.
As for the fate of Biden's vaccine mandate, many doubt it will survive the high court. It's conservative leaning, and they appeared skeptical last week, John.
All right, CBN's Tara Mergener. Thank you so much, Tara. Here with us now is Karen Harned. She's the executive director of the Small Business Legal Center at the National Federation of Independent Business and a plaintiff in the OSHA vaccine mandate lawsuit. Karen, welcome to Faith Nation. The Biden administration, Karen, as you all know, sees vaccine requirements as a way out of this epidemic, or this pandemic, rather. Can you explain your stand and why you believe workers should not be required to get the vaccine, even now when we're seeing another record COVID surge?
Correct. Well, we are very concerned that in this instance, OSHA has completely gone way, way beyond the bounds of its authority. Not only doing this mandate, we think it doesn't have the statutory authority to do this mandate because, as we all have learned, COVID just doesn't live at workplaces. It is ubiquitous. It is everywhere. But the way they did it, by making it effective immediately without the requisite notice and comment that you would typically go through for such a vast mandate, that also is just a bridge too far. And these are the reasons we challenged it in court.
Karen, as you well know, the Supreme Court released orders this morning, but a decision on the vaccine mandates were not among them. Any idea on when you expect to get a decision?
Well, we were very clear with the Supreme Court on Friday that we need a decision immediately. As your lead-in noted, it takes the rule goes into effect today. So we have business owners across the country, 80 million workers in limbo, and really needing an answer to the question as to whether or not this rule is going to take effect. So we are still holding out hope that we might have an answer today, but we definitely hope that it will, if not today, very, very soon this week, because every day that goes by is just another day of uncertainty for small business.
Karen, as you just mentioned, the rule goes into effect today, and as I understand, penalties for most groups that don't comply won't be applied until next month. Can you explain your understanding there? Are companies across the country going to have to pay fines for employing unvaccinated workers?
Well, that really is going to be up to OSHA's discretion. And again, I also think a lot will be determined based on what the court ultimately finds. Because if they do rule in our favor, it will mean that they do think there are some serious legal questions to OSHA's authority. So I really think all of us, including even, I would argue, OSHA, are needing some answers here from the Supreme Court.
Along those lines, if the court does decide against the president's vaccine requirements, for those organizations that don't comply, and perhaps, I know we're still waiting for guidance here, but will that decision work retroactively against the fines and penalties already in place?
Well, that again would be up to OSHA's discretion. My hope is they would not do that. My hope is they would just be prospective, but that would probably be more in their discretion if they were allowed to go forward.
All right, Karen Harned with NFIB, thank you so much for your time and your perspective today.
Thank you.
Well, controversial voting reforms become law today in the nation's largest city. It allows non-citizens to vote in local elections in New York City beginning next year. More than 800,000 people, including those authorized to work in the United States, and those who've been lawful permanent residents for more than 30 days can now cast their ballots. It also includes dreamers, the children of parents who came to the United States illegally. The law applies only to city elections such as mayor, city council members, borough presidents, comptroller, and public advocate. Special ballots will be prepared to prevent voting in statewide and national contests. Well, here with us now for our Monday Faith Nation panel, CBN Chief Political Analyst David Brody and Nathan Gonzalez, editor and publisher of Inside Elections. Welcome to both of you this Monday. This New York City law that went into effect, is this, David, an example of Democrats perhaps going too far in allowing non-citizens to vote? And perhaps will we see more of this?
Well, you know, John, it's funny how you preface that question, because I believe, can we rewind a John Jessup best of reel? Because, John, I believe you're asking me this question a lot about Democrat policies, are you not? Have Democrats gone too far? Have Democrats gone too far? It's the real, John. I mean, nothing against you personally. I like you, as you know. But the truth of the matter is, yes, Democrats have gone too far. And that's why, well, Nathan, pick it up from here. But they're about to get a shellacking come November, and this is the type of stuff they're doing. Look, non-citizens voting in America, look, I mean, really? And once again, that's not a conservative viewpoint. Well, yeah, it's a conservative viewpoint. But the point is that it really is all about independents at this point, right? I mean, independents are saying, you got to be kidding me. Like, they're thinking, hey, I'd love to vote for you, Democrats. You know, you got a few good things I like. You know, I'm an independent. I can go Democrat, go to Republican. But you're going to pull this? Oh, I can't. It's a bridge too far. It's the Democrats' playbook, and it's just killing them, John, killing them politically.
Nathan, David teed you up there, and let me just give you a little more of a setup. The New York City voting law goes into effect as Democrats on Capitol Hill make a renewed push for voting rights. Is election reform going to get done, or do laws like this one here in New York City, give Republicans perhaps the ammunition to make arguments like increased voting rights maybe equals increased voter fraud, as in, with respect to what we're seeing in New York City?
Well, speaking of voting broken records, I'm skeptical that major pieces of legislation are going to pass this Congress. But what Democrats are proposing at the national level does not include non-citizens voting. these non-citizens in New York City are not going to be able to vote in state and federal elections either. But what I think is interesting about how bringing these two things together is that as Democrats nationally are putting forward some what they want national standards for our elections. And right now, our elections are conducted at the state and local level. It's a very decentralized system. And Republicans are saying, no, the federal government cannot have a national standard. But yet when we have here in New York City where a local government wants to change the rules and how they're conducting elections, we have Republicans saying, no, you can't do that. You can't, as a local entity, you can't decide how you're doing your elections. So there's a little bit of mixed messaging going on in this. But politically, if Democrats are branded with the broad brush that they want non-citizens to vote in national and federal elections, then that's certainly not going to hurt that is certainly going to hurt their cause in their effort to keep narrow majorities. So the messaging matters. It's not just about what these individual pieces of legislation have in them.
Mixed messaging in today's American politics, hard to believe. Nathan, we'll stick with you here for a second. A lot of Republicans, when it comes to voter reform or voting rights, they may agree when it comes to election reform, but their definition of reforms includes increased election security. So is there a place for Republicans and Democrats for compromise here?
Well, I think if Democrats want to get something, if there's going to be a compromise, I think voter ID is a place to go. Voter ID or voters needing to show ID in order to vote has broad public support. Democrats have been reluctant because they feel like there are certain segments of the population that's difficult to get an ID, and thus would be prohibited to vote. But I think that that's one place to go. But the parties are just fundamentally in two different places. They're Republicans are looking at the counting and maybe willing to give some ground on how votes are counted, but Democrats are focused on who actually gets to cast a ballot and how easy is it to cast a ballot. And those are two different things. We have to agree on the problem before we can decide on the solution.
We, gentlemen, as you all know, are officially in a midterm election year, 10 months until Election Day. Republicans just need a net gain of 1 seat to gain control of the Senate. In the House, you have, I believe it's the 26th or 27th Democrat who just announced today that they are not going to run for re-election. So what are some of the big toss-up races you gentlemen are looking at? David, we'll start with you first.
Well, there's quite a few. Obviously, the House, obviously there's a lot of things going on there. But in the Senate, Missouri is going to be interesting. I'm looking at Missouri. Obviously, Pennsylvania is a big one too, and you can go on. Nathan would be better at that question than I would. I'll just simply say that I do believe Republicans can definitely take back not just the House, but I think the Senate. There's no doubt the Senate's in play as well. But Nathan, I have a better read on that.
Yeah, I think that the House is an easier reach for Republicans, but the Senate is certainly possible. I think 3 Democratic incumbents to focus on would be Mark Kelly in Arizona, Raphael Warnock in Georgia, and Catherine Cortez Masto in Nevada. All 3 of them are raising a ton of money. They're running in states that Biden won very narrowly in 2020. So Democrats don't have a lot of room for error. They can't afford to have any sort of depressed turnout or lose a lot of ground with independents. In some places, Republicans have primaries and they're working that out. But because Republicans only need a net gain of 1 seat, I think you'd rather be the GOP than Democrats when it comes to which party is going to be in control in 2023.
Well, one thing we know for sure is as the year rolls on, we'll have both of you to give us your perspectives and insights to keep us honest. David Brody and Nathan Gonzalez, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, sad news here. Investigators believe an electric space heater is the cause of a Sunday fire in a New York City apartment building that took the lives of at least 17 people, including 8 children. The heater apparently setting fire to a mattress in one of the apartments. An open door let smoke spread through the 3-story building in the Bronx. More than 200 firefighters were on the scene, smashing windows and using ladders to save those trapped. Dozens were rescued, but one woman lost her entire family.
To see it in a mother's eyes as I held her, who lost her entire family. It's hard to fathom what they're going through. We will not forget you. We will not abandon you. We are here for you.
Governor Hochul announced plans to establish a compensation fund for the victims to help secure them housing. Coming up, high-level diplomacy with the goal of diffusing high-rising tension between the U.S. and Russia over fears of a military invasion in Ukraine. More on that next. Welcome back. U.S. and Russian officials are meeting in Switzerland trying to lower the temperature in Eastern Europe. Russia's estimated 100,000 troops deployed on the border with Ukraine, fueling fears of an invasion. The United States threatening massive consequences if Moscow doesn't back down. CBN's Dale Hurd reports on the ongoing escalation.
The U.S. is reportedly ready to discuss a deal limiting future missile deployments in Ukraine and pulling back on NATO military exercises in Eastern Europe if Russia will back off on Ukraine. This as tens of thousands of Russian troops remain camped on Ukraine's border, ready to invade. But Secretary of State Antony Blinken speaking Sunday did not sound hopeful about achieving success in the talks, at least right away.
I don't think we're going to see any breakthroughs next week. We're going to listen to their concerns, they'll listen to our concerns, and we'll see if there are grounds for progress. But to make actual progress, it's very hard to see that happening when there's an ongoing escalation.
Russian President Vladimir Putin wants guarantees that Ukraine will not be allowed into NATO and that NATO will pull back from former Soviet states. Russian officials say former Secretary of State James Baker made this promise to them at the end of the Cold War. The U.S. says that's not true. Historically, Russia views Ukraine as a strategic buffer against invasion. Some say Putin also sees it as a key to reasserting Russia's global influence, if he can dominate it.
They're in a bit of a difficult position because the Russian demands are non-starters, right? And everyone on the Western side, on the NATO side, agrees that they're non-starters. And yet, here is Putin and Russia kind of with all the cards, with this massive troop buildup on the Ukrainian borders.
Blinken says the U.S. and NATO are prepared to punish Russia if it moves on Ukraine.
There will be massive consequences for Russia if it renews its aggression, economic, financial, and other consequences, as well as NATO almost certainly having to reinforce its positions on its eastern flank.
Anti-Russian protesters took to the streets of Ukraine's capital, Kiev, on Sunday, fearful that Putin may not be bluffing about an invasion.
We are afraid that Russia will attack Ukraine in the coming months. We all build this country, we love it, we believe in its future.
This is happening as Russia seeks to prop up another old Soviet state, sending troops to Kazakhstan to quell unrest after government forces opened fire and killed scores of protesters angry about rising fuel prices. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thanks, Dale. When we come back, though likely months away, states ready their response to a pending Supreme Court decision that could overturn abortion. At least one state trying to become an abortion sanctuary. Well, welcome back. Both sides in the battle over abortion are waiting on a critical Supreme Court ruling. If the justices overturn Roe v. Wade this term, some states are ready to ban the practice altogether. California, a rare exception, moving in the opposite direction to become what's called an abortion sanctuary. CBN senior national affairs correspondent Heather Sells reports.
California is already preparing for what could be a post-Roe America. Its new abortion council has released a guide that positions the state to rapidly increase the number of abortions performed and pay for them as well.
It's really a shocking document, and I think it shows that there is really just an absolute desperation on behalf of some in the abortion industry to do everything they can to thwart pro-life movement and pro-life states across the country.
If the Supreme Court were to overturn Roe, states would then be free to craft their own laws on the issue. California leaders believe their abortion-friendly climate would attract women from states choosing to ban the procedure. California is relying on predictions from the Guttmacher Institute and Abortion Advocate, which shows the number of women choosing California for abortions could jump from 46,000 to 1.4 million. That is close to a 3,000% spike.
We think that everyone should be able to access the care they need and make their own decisions about their family's future.
And the state may make that so-called care, including travel expenses, free to any woman who can't pay.
Gavin Newsom is actually talking about paying people, paying women with unplanned pregnancies to fly to the state of California, to pay for their hotel rooms, to cover all of their even work-related expenses if they have to take unpaid time off so that they can come here and end the lives of their unborn children.
It's all part of California's effort to become an abortion capital, or what supporters call a model for reproductive freedom.
I think California, as a value statement, wants to be that beacon, but we've got work to do.
The Abortion Council is also pushing back on religious liberty by calling for religiously affiliated hospitals to provide abortions. And it says the state must, quote, combat harmful and misleading information perpetuated by crisis pregnancy centers. One pregnancy center association, NIFLA, tells CBN News that's a false narrative. That's because the State Department of Health has granted medical licenses to its facilities that perform ultrasounds, plus its 2018 Supreme Court win that protected its free speech. California also wants better data on abortion, virtually ignoring that it's one of just 3 states refusing to provide its own abortion numbers to the CDC. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Thank you, Heather. Coming up, a quarter of a century in the making, the world's most powerful telescope arrives in space. See the scope of the mission next. We end tonight with this. After 25 years of work, a NASA project is finally paying off. The James Webb Space Telescope team completed the last step of the scope's initiation process Saturday. The telescope's mirrors took, get this, 2 weeks to unfold in a honeycomb shape, revealing its prize center dubbed the Golden Eye. The 21-foot mirror is the largest ever to be sent to space, designed to observe even the farthest galaxies. Webb's instruments won't start operating for another few weeks, though, and the public won't see their images for months. Webb's still making its way to an orbit 1 million miles from Earth, positioning itself for a clear view of the universe. And I myself can't wait to see those images when they are developed. Well, that's going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.